Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look at Sparta, Struggle for Greece. This is a game designed by Chris Van Beurden and published by Plague Island Games. This game is headed to Kickstarter this week, and for fans of strategy games set in ancient Greece, this is one you're going to definitely want to check out. First off, I want to give a hat tip to Stuart Tong from Plague Island Games. This is the second prototype for his second game since starting his company last year that he sent out to content creators. First one was 2 Minutes to Midnight, and the second one is this. And he did an amazing job on both of them, and that shows a lot of maturity for a new company to put the money into creating really good prototypes and sending them out to content creators. So that way we can provide a look at these games for you guys. So again, great job on his part. And one of the great parts is these miniatures are just fantastic. You see this Athenian miniature here, just looks really great. And you've got the Spartan miniature. I'm going to show you closer looks on screen of the sculpts so that way you can see what they look like. That will be in the deluxe version when they do go to Kickstarter. Otherwise, you'll be using standees. So if you're fine with standees, then you can get the deluxe version. If you want the deluxe version and get the miniatures, and I think there's even going to be metal coins too, I believe, then definitely spring for that deluxe version because that is going to be a gorgeous game the way it's done. The art, as you can see here, is fantastic, and that is what's on the cards. Just a great job on the art. It's very compelling, very fitting for the time period, and just really adds to the overall immersion into the game. The only one thing that was not done for the prototype, which is going to be in the final version, are the custom dice, and that's not a big deal because it's real simple to use the D6 for it. 1 is a failure, 2 and 3 are no effect, 4 through 6 is a success. So that was not a big deal, but it will be nice again to have those custom dice in the deluxe version. Sparta is designed by Chris Van Beurden, who's had some interesting games in his design portfolio already. Europe in Turmoil, 9 Years, The War of the Grand Alliance, and most recently, Barbarians at the Gate. All of those through Compass. This is his first game with Plague Island Games. So you see he already has a track record, a proven track record of good designs, and this follows suit. The two protagonists in this are Sparta and Athens as they struggle to control ancient Greece. Athens generally has the stronger naval power, and the Spartans hold the edge on the ground forces side in the Peloponnesian War, and there are two different wars in this game. The Peloponnesian War is the left track at the top of the map board, and at the top right is the Theban War. And in the Theban War, that's when things kind of change a little bit, as Athens has a slight edge, and the Spartans are kind of just right behind them. So it really does give you two different aspects of those pieces of history. You can also join them into a linked grand campaign and play all 12 turns, but that's recommended only after you've played the game a few times. That way you're familiar mechanically with the game, you understand the rules and everything. Then it's easier for you to do the full campaign. There's also a Solitaire Bot, so that way you can play solo if you choose. If you can't get anybody to play with, you can still play Solitaire, and that's really great. This is a card-driven area control game, style of game that strategy gamers are already very familiar with. It plays pretty smoothly and fairly easy for gamers to pick up and get to playing. So that's not going to be an issue if you played area control games before. And while you'll be able to get right into the game, you'll find that there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye in several aspects, which we'll be talking about as we go through the game. The games are 6 turns long, and as I said, it comes with 2 scenarios, the Peloponnesian War and the Theban War. Now, it does give you setups at the beginning of the game as to what leaders you're going to have, where your different influence is going to be at, and that's what these cubes and these discs are out on the map. Those are representing your influence in the different regions. And it's going to give you the standard setup as to what's going on where, who's got control of different areas. Where I think it's pretty cool is you get these extra setup cards here, and there's one here. This is the one I was playing with. The setup card for the 30 Years of Peace, then there's Brasidas' Endeavor, Struggle for Greece, and the Athenian Empire. So you have 4 different ones just for the Peloponnesian War. This will change up the settings of the game a little bit. You'll still get the base setup, but then the players have some agency here in changing some aspects of it. And that really does have an impact as to the start, because at the start of the game, you're going to, based on where you're at, you're going to have the regional control check. You're going to, the regional assessment, they call it. You're going to see who owns the different regions. And when you own a region, as you can see here, like for Peloponnesos or Boeotia, You have the Spartan Elite right here, and another one over there for Boeotia, along with 3 talents and then 1 talent there for Boeotia. Talents are your cash in the game, your money. Owning a region gives you the access to those commodities, the troops, as well as the money each turn. So you want to have as much money as possible because you need to fund all the things you're going to be doing throughout the game, but you also need to have a good mix of troops. You have elites, as you see at the top left, elite warriors. Then you have skirmishers and then cavalry. You also have fleets down here. And that's all going to come together for your naval combat as well as your ground combat. You need to make sure you have a good strength, which is going to be your army strength. I've knocked everything around here as I was playing, just finished playing, but you're going to have to keep track of what your current army strength is, your current naval strength, and then mix in what your military strength is based on the different aspects at the top, elites, skirmishers, and cavalry, and you'll come to an odds difference, like 2-to-1, 3-to-1, things like that, and then you can play battle cards, which can change the aspects of the game. But I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself here a little bit. Going back to what I was talking about, the regional control, you get the setup, and then you can change it with the setup cards. So you're not always going to be playing the exact same scenario every time. You have a little bit of agency as far as changing how things start off at the beginning, which is great. You can look and make sure you try to grab different areas of control so that way you can get the extra money at the start, because you're going to need that, like I said, to be able to do things. Victory conditions are pretty straightforward. You simply control the most regions on the map and you're the winner. And it's that easy. Now, the hard part is getting there. Now, I had said earlier, this is a pretty straightforward game to jump into, but there's also more to it than you see at first glance. That's because this is a type of game that you must always be thinking at least 1 turn ahead, oftentimes more, because you have to think about sequencing of your cards, along with prepping your units and getting them out on the board and then getting them to do different actions. You must have the funds first to pay to mobilize your troops, whether it's ground or naval forces, and a leader that you can attach to them before they can activate. These guys just don't spin up and head down range immediately. This is the old way of doing things. You have to pay, mobilize, march, then you fight. After that, you need to have an objective to attack and a pathway there. That's why these regional controls and these controls of spaces are important, because you see these roadways. As you move your troops across the map, you're going to have to make sure you have a road that they can pass through. If they can't pass through, they can't get to the objective. Now, you can still raid, you can siege, things like that, but if you're needing to move to a ground location, you need to make sure you have a pathway. And money is crucial in this game. And how you get the money is, like I was talking about, you get your base income, your base state income, along with taking regions, which provide up to a maximum of 3 talents per region, along with the various troop types, which will help build up and vary your armies for greater effectiveness in combat. We talked about that before with the elites, the skirmishers, cavalry, and then your fleets down here for both naval and ground combat. So you want to get control of these regions so that way you can get those assets, the financial as well as the military, and expect that those regions are going to fluctuate as the game goes on. They're going to trade hands on and off. When you think about it, don't think that they're trading hands every other day. You have to look at the time periods. There are years for each of these turns. So when it changes by the second turn, say a couple times or maybe just once or twice, it's already gone through several years of real time. So it's not like I got it today, you got it tomorrow. It's not that crazy. It actually does fit historically. Okay, so after that, that's the first step, which is the regional assessment. Then we get to the Hoplite Reset. That's where you're going to be setting up your army strengths, your naval strength, invest into those if you can. Then we get to shipbuilding recruitment. As I was saying, you're going to be picking your forces up. You're going to be building your forces up by spending the money. Then you have the action phase. That's where you're going to get 6 action cards each, and that's going to be your entire turn. You play through them alternatively, and then once the 6 cards are done, that's it for the turn. You move on to the next turn. And these cards are not your standard CG cards that a lot of people are used to, where you have the event or the ops points, things like that. These are totally different, that they're just events. And you may get cards that are going to be good for you. You may get cards that are good for your opponent. And you may get cards, most of the cards that are going to be good for either. But if you get a card that is going to hurt you, you need to find a way to get rid of it. And if you don't, you're going to have to play it before the end of the turn, and you are going to have that effect hit you as well. Cards cannot be carried over from hand to hand, so that's why you have to have all 6 cards played by the end of the hand. These aren't your standard event ops points cards. These cards will direct you to take specific actions on specific spaces, while other times you'll have the freedom to choose wherever you want to place your actions or take your actions. Most of the time, they're going to be about placing influence using envoys. Greater envoy is 2 points. The lesser envoy is 1. So if you have an empty space and you send a greater envoy there, it's going to place 2 influence. If you have a lesser envoy, it's going to place 1. And by placing 1 or 2, that means first removing, if there's an opponent influence there, you'll remove 1. So if you have a greater envoy, you have 2 actions or 2 influence, you'll remove their 1 influence and then you'll place your 1 influence. If there's nothing, you'll place 2. And these spaces all have different what they call autonomy points. 1 through 3 is the value, like Peloponnesus is 1, Zakynthos is 1 as well, Elis is 2, Sparta is 3, so on and so forth. When you have that 3 value there, then you own that space. Not always will you get access to specific areas. Now, there's other cards that will just tell you to place in any area, which is fine too. So that's why you have to look at your cards and try to sequence your cards in your hand as when you want to play them, along with the objectives that you want to accomplish that turn. This is the type of game where you need to be thinking ahead, not only in prepping your forces, but in shaping the battle space, in how you want to work your influence, gain allies and their associated forces, but also in making sure you open up roadways. These roadways are going to be crucial for you to move your troops across if you want to attack with your ground forces. You can still do your raids, still do your sieges, but if you need to move troops from your capital out to another location, you need to make sure you have a clear pathway that you have control of. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get there, and you're going to end up fighting part of the way there just to get through that, gain control, and then you can move through. So that's where you want to make sure that you play your cards. If you want to do a ground attack against somebody up here, for example, and you're down here, you want to, and you've got an opponent that's got some influence here, you want to play a card to get that influence out of there, or do a raid ahead of time. Get that influence out of there, then make sure you got somebody spun up and ready to go, then march them to do that land attack. So that's something that you have to be thinking of. And that's where what I really dig about this game is the fact that you're not just thinking just the simple, the immediate, you're thinking the macro and the micro as well. And I think that's pretty fantastic that you have to plan out your moves, and obviously, like the old saying, semper gumby, always be flexible. You have to be able to change your plans as you go too, which I think is really neat in this game. So like I said, there are raids, sieges, and then there's direct combat in land and sea. Raids earn you a quick buck. You get 1 talent when you do a raid. It's literally a hit and run. You're going in, you're taking some money, and you're gone. You can also then, when you do your raid, you can stay and then commit to a siege. And when you commit to a siege, you're going to have to pay 2 talents. Again, you have to spend money, and you're going to stay there, and you're going to carry out your siege. Every turn, you pay, you carry out your siege, and you're trying to wear down that influence in that location. Once you do, then you flip that unit to, or you flip that location, I should say, to your side, and you have control of it. Then you gain talents back based on the value, the autonomy value of that space. So it's going to cost you money, but you do get some return. But the big return is that you gain control of the space. You're going to get a little bit of money back, but it's going to cost you in the long run to do that. That's why it's good to try to get some raids going, because then you're actually getting enough money in to try to help fund those sieges, because you have to pay 2 talents per turn to do the siege. And it might take you 2 or 3 turns to finish out, maybe longer, your siege. So if you can be raiding at the same time, you can at least partially pay for the funding of those sieges. Now with combat, I had mentioned about these elite skirmishers, cavalry, and then your fleets down here. How it works basically is you're going to calculate the battle strengths of both sides, and you're going to take into account the overall and individual strength, the asset boxes up there at the top, as well as the army track down at the bottom, and if you have ownership of the space. If you're the defender, you're going to get +1 on that. So that's going to be advantageous. Then you're going to figure out the battle strength that's going to be reflected over here in the battle strength table there. And like I said, you may have a 3-to-1 advantage, but these battle cards can make a change in the battle, which I think is really, really cool. And it helps balance things out. There's no runaway leader, like I was saying before. That's one of the concerns when you see something like this. You feel like there's going to be a runaway leader. I've yet to experience that. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I've yet to see it happen in the games I've played, nor have I gotten the sense that it can happen that easily. Now, after it's out there in the wild and people play it a bunch of times, they might find some optimal way to make it happen. But I don't really think that we're going to see that. Now, these leaders that I was talking about, we've got like the Polmark, the Strategos. You got a couple that are just generic, and then you have named ones like Pericles and Archidamus and things like that, where you get these guys out here. They're going to have advantages. They're going to give you, I should say, advantages in battle. It says here for Pericles, during your round, spend Pericles and spend 1 favor to send a lesser envoy to any non-hostile space. After battle, you're going to roll and see if they actually gain experience or not. If he gets to his experience side, it says during your round, spend Pericles and 1 favor to send a lesser envoy to any space. Before, on the first time, it was any non-hostile. Now it's to any space. Then you have play Stone Axe. Initially, when he is not experienced, it says when he becomes spent, you gain 1 favor or you may discard a card. Then when he's experienced, you may gain 1 favor and you may draw, then discard a card. That's really powerful because, like I was saying before, if you have these, you do have these 6 cards in your hand every turn. Most of them are going to be, for both players. Sometimes it'll be more in favor of you than your opponent. You get something that is your card that can hurt you. This is where you want to have the power like this, because it says when he becomes spent, you get him out there, you have him do an action, he becomes spent, you gain a favor, and you may draw, then discard a card. So by doing this, you get 1 favor. It takes 2 favors. These are favors here. Now for the Athenian, they get 1 favor plus 3 talents every turn. The Spartan just gets 3 talents. These favors, you can discard 2 of them to discard a card. So that's one way to burn a bad card out of your hand that can hurt you. With Play Stone Axe here, you can gain 1 favor, which makes you halfway to having 2 favor to use to discard a card, and you may draw, then discard a card. So you can draw a card to replace the card you're going to discard. This is really, really powerful. So you want to make sure you get him experience and you don't lose him, because that is a really strong leader for the Spartan player. And like I said, a couple different ways of discarding a card. There's actually 3, like if you have a leader that gives you that capability, burning 2 favor, which also do other things in the game. And you get those at the end of the turn when we get to the Olympic Games. We'll talk about that. Some cards will tell you you may discard a card. There are not that many of them in the deck. So when you get one, if you have a bad card, you want to make sure to utilize that to get rid of that card right away. Or try to mitigate in other ways how much that card is going to hurt you. Now going back to the troops in the field thing, when they're done, they're going to return back. They're not going to stay out there for extended periods of time. You don't have big giant log trains to keep them out in the field. They're going to do their thing. They're going to come back, and then you're going to have to pay to remobilize them again. So like you're seeing, you're constantly having to spend to be able to do things. Now going back to the leaders for a second, you have some leaders that once you do something, that leader will allow you to stay on the board. So that's pretty cool. If you have that capability through a leader or through a card to stay on the board and not have to worry about coming back. So you can stay out there a little extra time and do a little bit more with that unit. And you're going to go back and forth through your 6 cards. And when you're done with your hands, both of you are done with your hands, then you're going to move to the next turn in the game. And you'll start all over again at the beginning of the next turn, checking out your regional controls, and then you'll change out these cards, which give you the benefits of what the location is. Like Chalcides here, you've got 3 talents. You got Attica's got 3 talents. Sicily, you get 3 talents. Right there, you get 9 talents with these 3 locations. You want to make sure that you maintain control of these locations that give you the talents, because all that money adds up and you can do a lot more with it. But like I said, you're going to be checking that at the beginning of the turn. At the end of the turn, before you get to that point, you have the Olympic Games, which is pretty much just a simple dice roll off, and whoever wins gets, I think it's the favor or money, and then the other person will get whatever the other person didn't take. So it's a pretty neat little way to kind of balance things out a little bit and give you a little bit of a return at the end of the turn. And one last thing I want to cover game-wise are these persistent events. We've got one here at Syracuse. We got these little token out there, and we've got one up at Hellespont. And I've got the cards on the side just as a reminder. Black Sea Grain for the Hellespont space. It says, if Athens controls the Hellespont, they gain 3 talents. So as Athens, at the time you play this card, if you own Hellespont, then you gain 3 talents immediately, on top of the 3 talents that you'll also get at the beginning of the next turn. Spartan control over the Hellespont counts double during victory determination, and it says here remove. Some of these cards will say remove. These are critical, so they'll say remove. When they say remove, that means remove them from the game. I just removed them and put them on the side as a reminder. Spartan control of the Hellespont counts double during victory determination. So if Sparta owns a Hellespont at the end of the game, that counts as 2 spaces. So that's really critical. Same thing here. Control of Sicily counts double during victory determination. So that is another one that you want to be mindful of, these persistent areas, these persistent events. If you have control of that, you want to protect that as much as you can, because these are going to count as double. And this could be real critical, especially when you get into turns 5 and 6. You're going to really be battling hard for those. So make sure that you keep that in mind when playing the game. And I think that's also pretty neat, because in a way it's a nice little balancing mechanism, and in a way slightly a bit of a catch-up mechanic. If one guy has taken a couple of extra regions and you've just had run of bad luck a couple times, well, now you can use these and you can kind of catch back up, which I think is a really cool way of balancing out the gameplay. And the one last thing you've got is the Solitaire Bot. You're going to have your solo player aid here, which is going to give you your bot. It's going to tell you how to play your playing cards, your place your influence, ally selection, desperate times, fighting your battles. It's going to give you all the steps for that, which is really cool, because it's pretty much going to tell you what to do, but you're going to have to kind of make some small judgments for the Solitaire Bot as you go along. But generally, it's going to really lay it out for you there. So it's pretty cool that you have both a 2-player and a solo player aspect. So everybody should be happy with this one. That covers pretty much everything in the game. I just want to give you a rough overview of how things work, along with some thoughts along the way. I hope it made sense to you, and I hope you can understand a little bit better how the game works. It's real simple. It's not a difficult game. Area control, whoever controls most regions wins. Really straightforward. Like I say, where the complexity comes in is with the cards. And I like how you'll find the layers of complexity as you're playing, because you'll start realizing, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this. But to do this, I first need to do this, and then I first need to do this. Then I can do that. That's why you have to look at your cards and then kind of lay them out in sequence in your hand as far as what you want to play. And at the same time, remember, you play this card on your turn. On that same turn, you want to make sure that you pay to mobilize your forces. If you're going to be doing something, it's going to coincide with that card. If you're planning on doing something, you can't just expect to have it happen immediately. You need to prep for it and expect that it's going to take a couple turns, a couple card plays for that to happen, which I think is really cool. Like I said, you're thinking macro and micro. Don't get too concentrated on the micro, because you get fixated on taking a space because you want it really bad, and you're willing to just concentrate on that. You're going to completely miss other areas, especially like the allies, the outlying allies. You want to make sure you have control of those too, because they're going to give you assets and money and roadways. It's really critical parts of the game. The game, though, I think has really solid replay value because the unique setup cards. You're going to have the same scenario setup every time, but these setup cards will change things up a little bit and give you a little bit more agency, like I said, to change things and get things started a different way each time. So that is going to start off. And then, of course, obviously the variability with the cards. You're going to have different hands of cards each time, as will your opponent. So that will also change things up. So definitely high replay value there. And it's an interesting game, one that I think multiple plays will help bring into focus more directed strategies at doing things. And again, don't lose track of the overall big picture for the small picture, because you'll just find yourself lost in the smaller issue and not concentrating on the bigger issues, maintaining control of those regions and taking some from your opponent. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.